Hello and welcome back. We begin with another session on the namesake. I've already covered the background, the important themes, note on the writer in my previous video. So if you have not watched that video, it might be a good idea to do that now. Here on, I move to the first chapter of the book. It is not going to be, I'm not giving you any answers or I'm not giving you any set pattern and I'm not dictating any answers to write. This is a discussion of the book. It is a discussion of Jhumpa Lahiri's diasporic fiction, particularly the namesake. And so it is more like a lecture, it is more like a discussion rather than giving you some kind of answers. We are going to read certain parts, certain excerpts from the book together as we go on. So let's begin there. So before we begin, just a note on the setting of the chapter or where the book starts. The book starts or it begins in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and it is set in 1968. Now, this setting is significant because it paints the world of the story for us. Lahiri sets the story in the time of professional migration from India. So 1960s and 1970s, this is a time where the Indian diaspora that migrates to different parts of the world, particularly to the West, countries like America, North USA, or Europe. This is the professional wave of professional migration. Earlier on, during the colonial times, there was a wave of migration of indentured labor, but this is a very different kind of migration from India. It is a professional people. Ashok, the protagonist, Ashok Ganguly, he comes from a middle class, educated background. He's an engineer, right? He's an engineer and a PhD scholar at MIT, and he lives in Massachusetts. Interestingly, this setting, the time is important. The wave of professional immigration from India during the 1960s and 70s. Secondly, Massachusetts itself, it was also the place where the first Puritans who settled in America. This was an area around Boston, Massachusetts. This was a place of first Puritan settlements in America. So they were the hardworking, rule-bound communities, averse to idleness and luxury. And if you want to read about a little bit more about Puritan settlements in America, especially the fiction, you can read Nathaniel Hawthorne. You can read Arthur Miller, The Crucible. So it is that Puritan, the first settlers in in America. First Puritan settlers in America, and very hardworking, rule-bound communities. And I don't know if it is intentional, but setting her novel here, and in this space where the first pioneers came and settled in America, one cannot help but draw a connection between the earlier Puritan settlers and the new diasporic communities who are now making a place for themselves in America by the dint of sheer hard work, right? So this wave of professional immigrants are going to make a space for them in America in the next few decades by sheer hard work. So setting the novel in Massachusetts in a way seems to evoke that connection, and we are going to see this again in I think chapter 3 or 4 when Gogol, Ashima and Ashok's son, when he goes to visit and when he goes on a school trip to a cemetery and he sees various graves and he sees various names of the earliest settlers and feels a connection with them. But returning to the first chapter, the chapter begins with the image of his young wife, Ashok's young wife, Ashima, trying to capture the flavors of home in the US. Let's read from the book. So it is set in 1968, and Here is Ashima Ganguly in her kitchen in the central square of apartments, combining Rice Krispie and Planters peanuts and chopped red onion in a bowl. She adds salt, lemon mix, thin slices of green chili pepper, mustard oil. Ashima has been consuming this concoction throughout her pregnancy, a humble approximation of the snacks sold for pennies in Calcutta sidewalks and on railway platforms throughout India, spilling from newspaper cones. So, look at these the ingredients, uh, the concoction, the food. It evokes memories of her hometown, Calcutta. It evokes the taste of and memories and sight, right? So it's not just the taste, but also this mixture that comes in spilling from the newspaper cones. Even now that there is barely space inside her, it is one thing she craves, right? It is a craving. A craving can be associated here with her pregnancy. It can all be also be associated with her longing and her memories for of home, with her longing for home. Tasting from cupped palm, she frowns. As usual, there's something missing. So, howsoever much she tries, howsoever much she tries and makes this again and again, there is always something missing. Now, something missing could be, some ingredient missing, some kind of spices missing, but it is also, I think, it is metaphorically also missing, as in, the home is missing, her family is missing, this important time in her life, her first child. She's pregnant, and yet there is nobody around her. She's alone. So there is this there's a sense of being at home, the sense of comfort of home that is missing. And of course, we are repeatedly reminded of her that she's an Indian in America, whether it is from her dress, she's wearing a sari, whether it is from the food, whether it is the way uh, she cooks, or little things that are peculiar, that are unique to her, like the fact that she never calls out her husband's name. So even when she feels a kind of a while she's cooking, she calls out to the husband. When she calls out to Ashok, she doesn't say his name. Ashima never thinks of her husband's name when she thinks of her husband, even though she knows perfectly well what it is. She has adopted his surname, right? She is also Ashima Ganguly now. She's adopted her surname but refuses for propriety's sake to utter his first name first. It is not the type of thing Bengali wives do. And that is where we come to the one of the central themes of the book. It is a Bengali woman, it is a Bengali couple, it is a Bengali family in America clinging to its culture, trying to preserve its culture in a foreign land. So these are the little things which make Ashima and Ashok different. These are the little things that make them uniquely Bengali. So one of the things that we notice here is, the fact that she is different from the rest of the Americans, and this is something that's going to come up again and again. Little things like she does not say her husband's name, like a kiss or a caress in a Hindi movie. A husband's name is something intimate and therefore unspoken, cleverly patched over. So instead of saying Ashok's name, she utters the interrogative that has come to replace it, which translates roughly as, "Are you listening to me?" So it is a glimpse of their relationship, which is at once intimate, close, but at the same time, there are certain rules, there are certain customs that characterize this relationship. So right from the first page, we see two things here. One, that there is always going to be something missing, right? Whatever she does, however much she tries to make a home in America, there is going to be something missing, right? There is going to be a flavor of Calcutta that will be missing. It is a diasporic family trying to preserve its culture, but there is something missing. And at the same time, as they preserve, as they make their life in America, they try to preserve certain cultures, or maybe it is just a habit, a custom, that she would never say her husband's name. This is something which, these are the little customs which make them uniquely Indian, uniquely Bengali. So the chapter begins with Ashima trying to capture the flavors of home in US. The opening scene evokes the diasporic condition, as we saw, the longing for home, and also, she's cooking. She's using the ingredients she has found in America to create the flavors of home. So, and even if there is something missing, she's still in the process of trying to create a home in exile. So various scenes in the first chapter that we are going to discuss, or the one that we discussed just now, they not only describe the life in India, but also they establish the contrast between India and America, home and this foreign land, like the custom of not calling the husband by his name. Now, another very interesting, I think, incident is, or the memory that we learn from Ashima is the memory of her first meeting with Ashok and the description of arranged marriage in Calcutta. Let's go and read that. So as Ashok, as we saw, she has pains, pregnancy pains, and she's going to remember the memory. We come across the memories as she's waiting for the child in the hospital. But before that, we as they go to the hospital, we see again the contrast between. We constantly see the contrast between America and India through Ashima's consciousness. She's constantly comparing, she's constantly missing home. There is constantly a sense of being in exile, being away from home, a kind of, not being familiar, not being comfortable in America. And another thing, like, the fact that she does not call her husband by his name. Now, as she is waiting in the hospital room, she has two other women in that room, and they're separated by curtains. The room is partitioned by curtains, but she can hear them. And she hears a man's voice, "I love you, sweetheart." Words Ashima has neither heard nor expects to hear from her husband. This is not how they are. And I think this is important. This is not how they are. It is not the question it is not the question that whether he loves or whether they love each other, but the fact that this is not this public display of affection, this open declaration of love is not something that is their custom. It is not something that they are accustomed to. Just like she's not accustomed to calling her husband by the name, that is something that Bengali wives do not do. These words of love would embarrass them both. It is the first time, and then the other things that are so different from the life that she has known in India. It is the first time in her life she has slept alone, surrounded by strangers. All her life she has slept either in a room with her parents or with Ashok at her side. So we get to know about her life in India, in Calcutta, a very sheltered life, a very protected life. She has never slept alone. She has lived in a community. She has never really lived alone. And it is a life where there are set rules of how to talk to the husband, what to say, what not to say. Later on, she thinks about the contrast with America, right? She thinks about how it is different in America. So these words of love are something which are lost in formality of relationships in India. But she has gathered that Americans, in spite of their public declarations of love, in spite of their mini skirts and bikinis, in spite of their hand holding on the street and lying on top of each other in the Cambridge Common, they prefer privacy. right? So these women would not, at the time when they are also dealing with pregnancy, they would prefer privacy. They would not they would not like intrusion. If Ashima were to push aside the curtains and talk to them as she wishes to do, she knows that this is not the American way, right? So you see how privacy, the private space and the public space, or private, the concept of private and the concept of public is inverted, right? It is private. This what is private in India? Husband's name. So husband's name cannot be spoken out aloud. It is private. It's intimate. The feelings that of love, the feelings of intimacy are private. They are intimate. They cannot be spoken out aloud. But then there is public life. You spend your life in community, you spend your life in family. So she has always lived in a community. She has never really lived alone. In contrast, America, affection is not really intimate. It is public declaration, and yet they fiercely guard their own arenas of privacy. Again, later on, we get a sense of the something missing that we saw in the earlier paragraph, when she's trying to capture the flavors. Here, as she contemplates the birth of the child, she's disturbed. She finds it strange that her child will be born alone, in a place where people either enter to suffer or to die. So, in a hospital, not that children are not born in hospital in India, but the fact that there is comfort, there is family around. There is a mother taking care of the daughter as she gives birth to her child. So here she feels that something that is missing. There is nothing to comfort her in the off-white tiles of the floor, the off-white panels of the ceiling, the white sheets tucked tightly into the bed. In India, she thinks to herself, women go to their parents to give birth, away from husbands and in-laws and household cares, retreating briefly to childhood when the baby arrives. So in India, women go home, go back to their mothers, go back to their parents, so that they can be taken care of. The mothers can, only the mothers can take care of the daughters in the way that they should be taken care of during the pregnancy. That's the common belief. So even, here, if you see again back in the American couples who are there in the same room, you have the husband and the wife. But here again, if you see the contrast with India, uh, childbirth or pregnancy, the husband, the daughter, the wife goes home for childbirth, right? For the process of birth, the childbirth, the husband is not present. The in-laws are not present. The woman is being taken care of by her mother, by her parents. So that is another. So that is in a way a kind of the most important relationship at that crucial moment of in a woman's life. So that is again a contrast. And then she is, of course, missing her parents. She consults a watch, which was a gift, kind of a parting gift from her parents. And I think this part I find very interesting. America's seconds tick on the top of her pulse point as a doctor checks. Her pulse rate is taken. It is American seconds, but on her on her wrist, right? On her wrist, it is the Indian time. The clock is ticking, the watch is ticking, the watch is ticking with the Indian time. So the cramps, the cramps, the doctors are trying to manage the cramps. Trying to time the cramps according to American seconds, whereas she does it in Indian time. She also, at the same time, calculates what would be the time at this time at this time in Calcutta. Already evening, 8:30. She thinks of what her parents would be doing at this point. Her brother, her mother, her father. So she thinks about them. So in a way, this metaphoric reference to American seconds and the Indian time, right? The Indian time that she calculates on her hand. She's more familiar with that. She doesn't need a watch to calculate or to monitor the time. So she still inhabits India in her mind, right? She lives in two time zones. She's physically present in America, in Massachusetts, but in her mind, in her heart, she is still in India, in Calcutta. In her memories, she's still in Calcutta. So she inhabits two times. And this liminality, I would say, right? There's a term for this. It is called being in between, right? Being in between. So this liminality is a hallmark of, or a mark uh, of the diasporic condition. Right? So this sense of being on the boundaries, sense of being on the edges, not being properly at home in Calcutta and not being at home in America, which she inhabits physically. This is a hallmark of the diasporic condition, especially the first generation migrants, right? This liminality is this, being on the edges, being on the boundaries of the two places, right? Belonging to two places simultaneously. It is a hallmark of the diasporic condition. So she spends her time thinking about consequences, motherhood in a foreign land. This is something that is not normal at all. She reads, but she tries to think of, even as she's interacting with the American nurse, she tries to think of the things that comfort her. She tries to remember her home. She watches she monitors the time, thinks of what would be happening in India. She reads the magazine that she had brought for the plane ride to Boston. It is a tattered copy of a Bengali magazine called Desh. And although she has read it several times, and we later on learn that she has read it several times, she does not throw it away. It is something just like the clock. Just like the watch. The magazine is kind of a reminder, a souvenir from her home. So she clings to that. She preserves that. So all these things evoke memories of home, a sense of, um, but at the same time, they also evoke nostalgia, memories of home, and also the sense of you are not that she's not at home. We as I said, we get a glimpse of her earlier, her young life before marriage, uh, and also her marriage, arranged marriage to Ashok. In Calcutta, before she was married, she was working towards a college degree, so she's educated. She used to tutor neighborhood school children in their homes, on their verandas and beds, helping them to memorize Tennyson and Wordsworth, to pronounce words like sign and cough, to understand the difference between Aristotelian and Shakespearean tragedy. But in Bengali, a finger can also, there is here the unfamiliarity with the language. She calls it, as long as a child has 10 finger and 10 toe, and then she remembers, because it is, after all, English is her second language. So she makes these mistakes. But in Calcutta, she was tutoring children in English literature, right? So she was teaching Tennyson, she was teaching Wordsworth. That's what she reads. So she reads Bengali magazines, she reads Bengali literature, Bengali books, but she's also well versed in English literature. A classic sign of post-colonial hybrid identity, right? Equally at home. If you again are referring back to Sujata Bhatt, diasporic, referring back to Sujata Bhatt, a different history, we again see this sign of a hybrid identity of in a post-colonial nation where the child is, or the people learn two languages and they're equally comfortable in two languages. So yeah, sorry. Ashima is one of the classic post-colonial subjects who's equally uh, with Bengali literature and also in English with English literature. And then, of course, there is a description of her arranged marriage. She has been meet her parents have been, she has been meeting her parents have been meeting various uh, boys, suitable boys for her to marry, and she would wear a sari, and there would be a small gathering. She would dress up, and her mother would then tell them that she is fond of cooking, she knits well, so all the things that uh, a traditional a girl growing up in the tradition, all the skills that a girl growing up in the traditional setup would possess. No, these are not just Indian. If you see older British literature, think of Jane Austen. Again, similar kind of skills women was supposed to possess. So, uh, despite her knowledge of English literature, this is what's important in the marriage scenario. Uh, it amuses. Ashima smiled, amused by her mother's salesmanship. Uh, and But then she goes on, and this is a particular incident that she mentions when she meets Ashok for the first time, where the family Ashok and the family is sitting inside, and his shoes are outside, and Ashima, unable to resist a sudden and overwhelming urge, stepped into the shoes at her feet. Right, so these are Ashok's shoes. Lingering sweat from the owner's feet mingled with hers, causing her heart to race. It was the closest thing she had ever experienced to the touch of a man. So this she might not say her husband's name, she might not there might not be public displays of affection, but there is a kind of intimacy, and this is we see a glimpse of that intimacy. Uh, the leather was creased, heavy, and still warm. The left shoe she noticed On the left shoe she noticed that there was one of the crisscrossing laces had missed the hole, and this oversight set her at ease. There's something that she knows about this man, right? She has felt his shoes. She knows that he has this crisscrossing. There is there's some kind of familiarity. She knows these little things about this man before she sees him. However, it is only after the betrothal that she learned his name, and a week after that, there are invitation cards, and 2 weeks later, she's married. Again, a very family. It is not a small affair between two people. The marriage is a family marriage in Calcutta. A Bengali marriage or an Indian marriage is a family affair. So these were, and as jostled around by her aunts and countless cousins hovering around her, from Ashima Bahaduri, she becomes Ashima Ganguly. Now, this lack of public display of affection, Ashok is a very undemonstrative man. There is certain formality in their relationship. They would not, you cannot, the intimacy of this relationship is not for anyone to see, and this kind of gives an impression that they are not close. But if you read closely, and if you read through the book, we see these little glimpses which show the strength of their relationship. So the relationship might not be about public displays of affection, but there is a kind of companionship. They spend time together, they talk to each other, they learn about each other's days. So there is companionship. There is a strength in that, these exchanges that they see, and customs, habits, right? They adjust to each other's habits. They kind of shape their routines to each other's habits. So there is a strength underlying this marriage, this relationship. Uh, and every time she sees him polishing the shoes, she remembers this one little indiscretion where she put her feet in his shoes when he first came to, or when they first met. So yeah, so it is not a distant, cold relationship. That's what I want. Yeah, this is not a distant, cold relationship. They have arguments. Their first argument had been over a sweater she had shrunk in the washing machine. So they have their arguments, they have their moments of intimacy, they have their conversations, a sense of companionship as they talk to each other. They shape their life, their everyday routine. around each other's habits and customs and likes and dislikes. So we are introduced, as I said, we are introduced to Ashok and Ashima, the main protagonists, the first generation immigrants. We also learn a little bit of their life and the contrast that this, how different this life is from the life that they have lived in Calcutta. So the close bonds between the families, also the close bond. We come to know the close bonds between the families, which are emphasized by their absence. Right, she has always lived with somebody. So the close bond between Ashima and her family are become more prominent when she feels their absence. She thinks how things would have been. During the childbirth, if she was surrounded by her family or if she was at home. So this nostalgia permeates the novel right from the start. We see the contrast between the home and their not being at home. By the very discussion of arranged marriage, the nature of their relationship that seems so out of place in America. They have They've hardly met and yet they marry. Ashok is not a very demonstrative person, and neither does Ashima expect any demonstration or open expressions of love. And this becomes particularly evident in contrast to the American couples about whom we hear in the hospital. In contrast to these American couples, Ashok and Ashima's relationship, when for to these American couples, Ashok and Ashima's relationship might seem unnatural, cold, undemonstrative, detached. But equally, for Ashok and Ashima, their relationship is equally strange. One has to be familiar with the traditional attitudes towards marriage and gender and displays of affection to understand and not to misread this relationship as cold and detached. There is a sense of trust, there is a sense of companionship that we see right from the first, and it builds on as the novel goes on. There is also a sense of being together, of having a shared background, shared roots that helps them navigate through their lives in the foreign land and its foreign culture, right? So they share the background, they understand each other because both of them come from similar Bengali cultural background. Another important aspect, I think, of diasporic marriages that we see here is Ashima's reluctance to travel in America. She does not really want to come to America. She wants to stay back in India. She misses her family, but she's denied. It is rather her choice whether she wants to come to America or stay back in India. It's never really considered, and she gets what she wants only when towards the end of the novel when she's old. But in a traditional marriage, in the traditional gender equations, gender expectations in such a relationship, uh, they tend to, such relationships tend to overlook the woman's desire. And Lahiri tells us about this in a kind of a very nonchalant, matter of fact manner, which is painful and yet straight, that this is how things are. She's going to miss, but she accepts it stoically because this is how things are in a traditional marriage, or this is how things are for a woman in a traditional relationship. Another, so we their arranged marriage. We are introduced. We get an account of their early years in America, their traditional marriage. Sorry, their arranged marriage here. Uh, Remarriage. And now let's go and read about Ashok's accident, right? That is very important. That is an important event that we come to know in Ashok's life, right in the first chapter. And it kind of changes his life because prior to the accident, he was happy with his life in India. It is only when, he's traveling, reading a Russian novelist, Nikolai Gogol, and the fellow passenger who dies in the accident tells him to travel, that books are never going to give him the real experience of traveling. So this stranger whom plants this yearning of to travel in his mind. Till now, he has been happy with his life in India. The accident changes it and makes him realize the importance and also how ephemeral, how fragile human life is. And he's saved by a single page from the book by his favorite Russian author Nikolai Gogol in the days that follow the accident. And in his decision to travel against the wishes of his family, we see a kind of growth in Ashok, a growth of a new kind of individualism. Let's read. All right, so yes, the strangers that whom he meets in the train called Ghosh, he's the one who plants this seed, this yearn of for a seed of desire to travel, to see the world. He says, "You're still young and free. You're not married. You're still young, free. Do yourself a favor before it's too late, without thinking too much about it. First, pack a pillow and a blanket and see as much of the world as you can. You will not regret it. One day it will be too late. So seize the moment, seize the time. You're still young. Go ahead, travel. Then it would be too late." And he gives him his address. Ghosh gives him his address and tells him that he should be traveling. Ghosh dies, right? Ghosh dies in the accident. Ashok survives. Uh, he's there lying amongst the bodies, the fragments. And as the people are looking for, people are looking for life amongst these bodies. The rescue team is looking for anyone who's alive. Uh, Ashok uh, Ashok raises his hand, a gesture that he believed would consume the small fragment of life. He's injured. He uses the last ounce of his energy to raise his hand. He was still clutching a single piece of the overcoat, crumpled tightly in his fist. The overcoat is a famous story by Nikolai Gogol. So he's still clutching the this single page of the overcoat, and when he raised his hand, the wad of paper dropped from his finger. "Wait!" he heard a cry. "The fellow by that book. I saw him move." And so he's saved by the book, literally by the page from Gogol's book. And that remains a very important transforming incident in his life. As you know, during his long recovery, during the long period of recovery, as he learns to walk again, the parents pray for him, the mother fasts, and so on. He refuses to read. He reads his engineering book because instead of going seeing the world through the books, now he remembers what Ghosh had told him. Pack a pillow and a blanket. He remembers he heard Ghosh say he remembered the address Ghosh had written on a page of his diary somewhere behind the tram depot in Toliganj. Now it was home of a widow, a fatherless son. It shows that how ephemeral, how fragile human life is. So she needs to seize the moment. And so as the months pass, Ashok began to envision another sort of future, no longer in India, no longer with the family. He imagined not only walking, but walking away as far as he could from the place in which he was born and in which he nearly died. So for Ashok, in Bengal and India is not only a place of birth, but it is also a moment where it is also a place where he nearly died. It is also a place where he saw, he felt, he encountered death, right? Which made him realize how fragile life is, which made him want to walk away from this place, see the world. And so he tells his parents, who are not really happy, but he decides to go. And as now, returning to the present, married, the wife is waiting for a child, for the birth of the child. He's sitting outside. He remembers that evening, he remembers the accident. Again, he tastes the dust on his tongue, sees the twisted train, the giant overturned iron wheels. None of this was supposed to happen, right? None of this. The accident was not supposed to happen. He was not supposed to migrate to America, but no, he had survived. He was born twice in India and third time in America. So America, in a way, where he reinvents himself, where he finds and makes a new life for himself. For Ashok, It's a place for new birth. It is a place where he was born again, he was born the third time, his three lives, right? So it's a place of birth. America in is a place of birth of three lives by 30. For this, he thanks his parents, their parents, and parents of their parents, his ancestors, all of them looking after him. He does not thank God. He openly reveres Marx and quietly refuses religion. And here we see Ashok as the kind of man. He is pretty quiet, calm, following his systems of belief, believes, his ideologies quietly, not imposing it on anyone. He refuses religion, but he never stops Ashima from following the customs. He never really stops Ashima from deciding about what she wants to do. If she wants to organize a ceremony for the birth of the child, she does that. Ashok does not really, he refuses religion. He's atheist. He reveres Marx. He's a Marxist, but he does not really impose it. But there is one more dead soul he has to thank. He cannot thank the book. The book has perished, as he nearly did in scattered pieces, right? The book died, but who saved him? Instead of thanking God, he thanks Gogol, right? So instead of God, it is a writer, the Russian writer who saved him his life and whom he remembers as he waits for his child, for his son to come into the world. So that's the end of first chapter. This is a rather long video, so I'm going to just cover the first chapter in this video and then maybe we go to the second, but just to recapture the points that we have covered. So as I was saying, Ashok's accident, the decision, it helps him it helps him grow up. We see a new kind of individualism where he decides on his own to migrate, to see the world despite what his parents want and so on. This decision shapes his life. It also shapes Ashima's life and also that of his children, Gogol and Sonia. So traditional structures no longer control and shape an individual. The novel is also about the gradually globalizing world, right? Where there is opportunity to travel, where there is opportunity for education, for the work, for earning money, the slowly loosening bonds of tradition and a kind of reshaping of older societies. It is felt right down to the level of individuals and families, and we see it in diasporic fiction like that of Lahiri in especially this particular novel. Ashok, after his accident, decides, as I said, he goes to America, returns, marries Ashima, the birth of the son. Yet the nightmare of the accident stays with him. So Gogol's name, naming the son after the Russian author who saved his life. He would later tell his son that Gogol means life, and Gogol means the name means continuity for Ashok. It is a reconfirmation of life that Ashok and Ashima are going to live in the diasporic exile. So even when they are in exile, life does not end. They make new home, they make a new life in a new country. So in the end, I shall talk a little bit about some literary motives and symbols that are introduced in the first chapter, and they recur throughout the novel. The first is, of course, the name of the name. The name of the novel, it is the namesake. The namesake refers to their son Gogol, who shares a name with the famous Russian writer Nikolai Gogol, whose book saved Ashok's life in a very life-threatening moment. And so he names his son after the author. But there is more to the name. The confusion that we are going to see in America over the Dak Naam and Bhalu Naam, or the official name, which I also mentioned in reference to Jhumpa Lahiri's, the author's name, in the first video. So please go and see that. This confusion over the name is also recurring throughout the novel. Also, the fact that Ashima does not call her husband by the name. So naming is an important motive. Naming gives a person his or her identity. We are known by our names. But here we see that a name need not refer to just one person. It might be, the son's name might signify an important memory and an important moment in the father's life. Also, names, a person might have two personas and therefore two names: the name that is for family, his intimate group, or and the name that, the name for the persona that he presents to the world. So name, the identity or the name is not unitary. Just like, you have several identities, naming or this confusion over the name signifies multiple identities that a person has. Our names also not only symbolize a person, but, with Ashima Bahaduri becoming Ashima Ganguly, right? The changing of status. It signifies family. It signifies community. It signifies marital status, right? All these things are important. So, birth of the child might is, the name of the child, as we see here in this particular, in the next chapter that we are going to read. Naming of the child, remembering one's name, changing one's name. It might be an individual event, but it is also a community, a cultural event, right? Naming is a part of culture. It is a part of the community that we come from. We also have this repeated reference to food, right? Food and taste. I think it is an important form of symbolism, because taste is one of the most inner, most visceral senses. It evokes the longing from home. You can taste the nostalgia, the opening scene where she's trying to capture the taste of Calcutta. Later on, we see her reinterpreting Bengali cuisine with the ingredients that she gets in America. So, in a kind of, it is a part of the process of finding a new home, making a new home, creating a new home in the foreign land, putting down roots in America. So, food is central right from the beginning, right from the first scene in the novel. It recalls home, it recalls childhood. It is also a symbol of creating new communities, forging new connections. I think important reference throughout is other books and the authors. They give us about, it kind of draws a contrast between Ashima and Ashok. Ashima reads Bengali literature, but she also reads English authors like Wordsworth and Tennyson. Her books reflect her post-colonial upbringing. They also reflect her nostalgia, longing for home, as she clings to the same books and rereads the same magazines again and again in America. So for Ashima and Ashok, they also open the world, uh, which they have not seen till they have migrated to America, the world that they had not seen. So Wordsworth, Tennyson, it opens up the images of England for Ashima, just like Russian novelists, Russian writers open up the world for Ashok. So in India, they read about America, they read British writers, they read Russian writers. Once they are out, Ashima reads Bengali literature to keep in touch with home. So books become a means to overcome physical limitations or geographical limitations, right? They open up new worlds, but at the same time, they become a means to preserve connections with home. In one of the scenes later in the novel, in a gathering of the Bengali community, they sing songs written by Tagore. So the authors and their books offer a way of seeing the world. They also become a way of yoking the plot together. At one point of time, Ashok's son Gogol compares his own life to that of Nikolai Gogol, the author. And in the end, when Gogol starts reading his namesake, Russian writer Nikolai Gogol, it is like knowing his father all over again, but in a more deeper and mature manner. So the books and authors constantly establish connections between home and exile, between generations, and so on. And lastly, I think train travel is also a recurring motive. Lot of action, important conversations happen during this travel, and I think it is only appropriate because train travel, migration is a main theme of the book. Then, of course, there is Ashok's accident, which casts a shadow over the entire book. It is a shaping event in Ashok's life. Later, several important scenes happen during train travel, like Ashima losing all the gifts she had brought for her family in a train and finding them later, so that she slowly starts to realize that this can happen only in this country, in America, and she can start looking beyond her longing for home to see a kind of safety and security and the good things that America has to offer. Later on, Gogol meets his first girlfriend during the train travel. He misses a father who waits for him when he comes home by train. So, important scenes of his marriage occur during the train travel. So, in a way, the travel also is a way, just like books and author, train and traveling, it's one of the ways to link the themes of the play. I think these are important symbols and plot techniques that Lahiri uses to link her work together. So we are going to, I'm going to end this video now. It's become quite long. Please go over the previous one to understand, to get the background of the book. And I would soon be doing the second chapter of this particular novel. You can, yeah, you can subscribe. You can follow this session of this series of lectures on the namesake. So thank you and see you again soon.